Welcome to the Inner Essence, a space of mindfulness, spiritual awakening, and reconnecting with your true self. Breath, be present, and begin your journey with it.
This didn't cross your path. It intercepted your timeline. Something in you pulsed, a quiet signal breaking through the noise, and this moment answered. You felt the repetition, the strange déjà vu of patterns returning, and this is the hinge where it shifts. A Lemurian whisper rises through you, crystalline and familiar. If you're here, the loop is already losing its grip. This isn't information, it's a transmission. Let your shoulders soften as you breathe once, slowly, and notice a gentle warmth gathering in your chest. That sensation is memory returning, not imagination. The patterns you've lived aren't failures. They're the physics of an observer repeating what it expects. Stay present. A deeper coherence is forming, and the field around you is already responding to your awareness. The echo always begins quietly, so quietly that most people mistake it for coincidence. You notice a pattern in your life repeating, the same emotional texture resurfacing, the same outcome arriving dressed in different circumstances. It feels external, as if reality is recycling itself around you. But the truth is subtler, almost uncomfortable in its precision. The echo begins with what you observe. It is not punishment, not destiny, not flaw. It is the residue of your attention shaping probability into form. Every time you look at a situation with a familiar expectation, this is how people treat me, this is how things usually go, this always happens, you collapse the wave into the known. Physics becomes memory. Memory becomes pattern. Pattern becomes the loop. This is why the same storyline keeps returning. Not because life is uncreative, but because your foundational observer has been narrating from an old script. The mind doesn't choose novelty by default. It conserves energy by repeating what it recognizes, and the field responds faithfully. Imagine your attention as a tuning chamber. Whatever frequency you hold, even unconsciously, becomes the next moment's blueprint. If you've been expecting disappointment, the field finds a route to deliver it. If you've been anticipating loss, the timeline shifts toward it. The echo is efficient, almost elegant. It reflects you before you realize you're being reflected. But something changes when you begin to notice the noticing. When you catch the micro-thought forming, when you hear the subtle tension in your chest before an old conclusion rises, the loop loses its authority. Awareness interrupts inertia. The observer observing itself creates space, a thin, bright moment where probability can rearrange. You may sense it as a brief warmth in the sternum, or a sudden clearness behind the eyes, as though your inner narrator is stepping aside for just a breath. That breath is enough. Most loops survive because they're familiar. They feed on predictable reactions, habitual interpretations, emotional settings left running in the background. The echo returns because it trusts you will meet it with the same lens you used last time. When you stop giving it the same attention, the echo begins to fade. When you interrupt the inner commentary, the pattern dissolves. Let yourself feel this shift now. Breathe once, slowly, deliberately, and notice the sensation at the center of your chest. Don't analyze it. Just observe the warmth, the subtle expansion. Say internally without force, I interrupt the echo now, not as affirmation, but as a quiet decision. You may feel a slight release, like a thread loosening. That is the observer stepping out of its own reflection. The moment you become aware of the echo, it can no longer repeat in the same way. The pattern depends on your unconscious participation. You are no longer unconscious, and the field around you feels that change. The heart has always been the place where the loop weakens first, though most people never notice the signal. Long before the mind understands that a pattern is repeating, the chest tightens or softens, the breath shortens or expands. The pulse shifts as if responding to a memory older than the moment. The heart is not just an emotional organ, it is the field's reset key, the one center that refuses to follow the old script when given even a fraction of attention. Coherence begins the moment the heart and breath fall into conversation. When the inhale and exhale balance in steady rhythm, the nervous system recalibrates and the observer's lens clears. The loop thrives on emotional noise, uncertainty, tension, old conclusions rushing in before new perception can form. But coherence reduces that noise. It creates a steady internal signal, a clean tone that reality responds to. In that clarity, probability rearranges itself. Imagine breathing in for 5 seconds, holding the fullness just for a quiet moment, and releasing for 5. As you do, something subtle happens. The heart's electrical field becomes ordered. This isn't metaphor, it's physics. Rhythms syncing, creating a signal strong enough to override the habitual patterns that keep repeating. When the heart grows steady, your thoughts follow. When the heart softens, the emotional charge attached to old narratives dissolves. The observer stops collapsing the same outcome simply because it is familiar. The heart speaks a language the mind often forgets. Emotion, when coherent, becomes a kind of command. Calm not as passivity, but as precision. Gratitude, not as sentimentality, but as an organizing frequency. Openness not as vulnerability, but as expanded perception. In coherence, the body stops replaying yesterday's reaction, and the field notices the shift immediately. Reality no longer has to mirror the old you. Place your hand over your chest now, not as a gesture but as a form of listening. Feel the slight rise beneath your palm, the warmth radiating outward, the quiet intelligence moving through your ribs. Stay with it for a breath or two. You may sense a soft pressure or a gentle pulse awakening where you usually carry tension. That sensation is not random, it is your field reorganizing around a new signal. Most people try to change their lives from the mind outwards, wrestling with thoughts, forcing new interpretations, trying to will themselves into different outcomes. But the heart resets the entire system from within. It is the tuning fork of your timeline, the one center capable of shifting your emotional frequency instantly. When the heart is coherent, the observer gains clarity, and clarity breaks repetition. Notice how your body feels as you stay with this warmth. The loop expects the old reaction, tightness, anticipation, a familiar pull toward past conclusions. Instead, you're offering a new signal, steady and precise. This is where timelines begin to diverge. This is how repetition dissolves. The heart isn't following the loop anymore, it's rewriting it. There are moments in life when something stirs inside you without warning, as if an old signal rises from beneath your awareness and taps gently from within. Most people mistake that sensation for emotion, intuition, or imagination. But what you're feeling is older than any memory you consciously hold. Your DNA carries layers of information that stretch far beyond this lifetime. Patterns of perception, responses to subtle energies, ancestral imprints, and something deeper still. The Lemurian code, a quiet architecture of awareness designed to awaken only when the observer is ready. The reason this moment found you is not abstract. Your field responded to a frequency that matches something dormant inside you. It's the sensation of recognition without memory, the way your chest warms when a truth approaches, the way your breath slows when something familiar finally edges into the present. The Lemurian code isn't mystical in the exaggerated sense. It functions more like dormant software. It waits for resonance, for coherence, for a shift in your internal state that tells it you can perceive without collapsing into old fear or repetition. Consciousness is the trigger. When you pause long enough to notice the loop, when you breathe into your chest and feel the subtle expansion, you're not just calming your nervous system, you're activating an older intelligence inside your biology. The heart's coherence creates a stable field, and in that field, dormant information begins to rise. It's similar to warming a frozen archive. As the temperature shifts, layers thaw, textures reveal themselves, fragments reconnect. Your body becomes a library, gently reorganizing itself. Imagine a thin line of gold beginning at the base of your spine, rising slowly through the center of your body. You don't have to visualize it clearly, simply sense the idea of an upward motion. That is the internal metaphor your system uses when stored memory begins to wake. The gold isn't literal. It represents clarity returning, ancient threads of perception weaving back into your present awareness. You may feel warmth along your back, a slight tingling at the neck, or a soft pulling upward in the chest. These are subtle signals that your field is adjusting to new information. Forgiveness plays a role here, not the emotional idea of letting go, but a biological one. Forgiveness changes the emotional syntax inside your system. It releases stored tension, dissolves old interpretation loops, and frees the nervous system from replaying ancient responses. When that tension drops, your DNA becomes more receptive. The body opens, the field steadies, and the dormant threads of the Lemurian memory begin to hum again. This awakening is never dramatic. It feels more like a remembering that arrives slowly, then all at once. An intuitive clarity about what no longer belongs in your life, a surprising calm in situations that used to tighten your chest, a subtle pull toward choices that elevate you rather than repeat you. These aren't personality shifts. They're signs that your deeper architecture is turning back on. Stay with that golden line for just another moment. Feel it gently rising. This is not fantasy. This is your system remembering itself. The reason this moment found you is because something inside you finally answered. Breaking the observer loop never begins with force. It begins with a shift so subtle that, at first, you might think nothing has changed. The loop survives through familiarity. Your familiar reactions, your familiar emotions, your familiar narratives replaying themselves automatically. It relies on your unconscious participation. When you start to see the observer observing, the entire mechanism begins to loosen, as if the gears that once turned effortlessly now hesitate before continuing their old rhythm. The first crack in the loop appears when you notice your own perception with a kind of distance. You hear the old thought forming, but it no longer sounds like truth, just habit. You feel the usual tightening in your chest, but instead of collapsing into it, you watch it rise and fall like a tide. You witness the witness. In that moment, you're no longer inside the reaction. You're looking at it from a wider vantage point, and the pattern doesn't know what to do with that kind of awareness. Its momentum depends on you believing it is you. Once the witness is seen, the emotional frequency becomes the next gateway. The loop is emotional before it becomes behavioral. It hooks you with a feeling long before it convinces you of a conclusion. That's why shifting the emotional tone is more powerful than challenging the thought itself. A clearer breath, a softening in the sternum, a small pause before assigning meaning. These micro shifts rewrite the state your mind is interpreting from. Change the emotional frequency, and the story it produces rearranges accordingly. You might notice this as a sudden spaciousness in the chest, a sense that the moment is less personal than it used to feel. You're not overriding the old emotion, you're stepping into a new one. The loop expects tension, contraction, defensive anticipation. When you offer calm instead, real, grounded calm, the loop falters. It can't continue collapsing the same outcome if your emotional field no longer feeds it. Then comes novelty. Not dramatic shifts, but tiny deviations that signal to the field that you are no longer playing by the old rules. A different response in a familiar situation. A softened breath where a sharp reaction used to live. A willingness to hold a question instead of rushing toward an answer. Novelty is the moment your system tells the universe a new timeline is possible. Reality listens, the field reorganizes, and the loop, deprived of repetition, begins to unwind. Take one slow breath now. Let your awareness settle into the chest and quietly whisper to yourself, I choose the new pattern now. Notice how the body responds, perhaps with warmth, perhaps with stillness, perhaps with nothing more than a gentle clarity. That's enough. The decision has been made. If you felt even a slight shift, honor it, anchor it, engage with it. Tap the like button as a physical signal that you're stepping out of the old loop, and write in the comments, I choose the new pattern now. This simple act tells your field and your mind that the change has already begun. There is a particular kind of resonance that doesn't feel like thought, intuition, or emotion. It feels like a subtle alignment, an internal click that happens without sound. When this moment found you, that alignment had already begun. Something in your field answered a signal that didn't originate in your mind. It came from the crystalline grid beneath your feet, the ancient network of energetic memory woven through the earth long before cities, languages, or histories existed. The crystalline grid is not an abstract idea. It is a living field of coherence, a planetary nervous system carrying information through frequency rather than words. Every person emits a signature signal, a unique vibration shaped by their emotional baseline, their intentions, and the memories encoded in their DNA. When your frequency rises to a particular threshold, when your inner state becomes steady enough, coherent enough, receptive enough, you become detectable to that grid. And when you are detectable, you are called. This call shows up in ways that feel strangely personal, sudden moments of stillness, a pull toward introspection, a sense that something long forgotten is attempting to surface. You may notice your breath slowing without effort, or a warmth spreading across your chest for no apparent reason. These changes are not happening in isolation. They're responses to the grid interacting with your field. Imagine the Earth not as a mass of stone, but as a lattice of light beneath its surface, golden threads carrying information across continents, through mountains, under oceans. When your internal frequency shifts, even slightly, one of those threads vibrates back. It's as if the planet recognizes your coherence and mirrors it, sending a subtle pulse upward into your body. You might experience it as a grounding sensation, or as an unexpected calm rising from the lower part of your spine. The grid is communicating with you in the only language it knows, resonance. The Lemurian energy woven through this network is not a mythological relic. It is a memory of human coherence, a time when perception and intuition were not separated from daily life. The grid stores those patterns, and when someone begins to break the observer loop, when they stop repeating old frequencies and create space for new ones, the grid responds as though welcoming an old friend. It recognizes readiness. You may feel a sense of being guided without being directed, as if life is gently organizing itself around you. Synchronicities appear, subtle at first, then undeniable. Conversations shift. Old emotional weight loosens. You begin to trust moments that once felt random because they no longer feel random. The crystalline grid amplifies clarity and softens noise, and your system begins to harmonize with that signal. Take a moment now to imagine light rising from the center of the Earth. Not a beam, but a slow expansion, like a glow traveling upward through layers of stone and soil until it reaches the soles of your feet. Let it move up through your body, steady and unhurried, until it reaches your chest. If you feel warmth, heaviness, or even a quiet sense of presence, you're sensing the grid acknowledging you. This is why this moment found you, not by chance, but by resonance. The grid called, and something inside you finally answered. There is a point in the awakening process when everything external becomes secondary, almost muted, as if the real activity is happening behind your ribs. That quiet intensity you felt growing in your chest, the warmth, the subtle pressure, the gentle pulsing, is not random. It is the beginning of your inner sun activating, the luminous center that has always been present, but rarely acknowledged. This light is not symbolic. It is a biological and energetic response to coherence, memory, and presence aligning inside you. The body holds a vast amount of information in silence. When your observer becomes aware of its own patterns, when your heart begins regulating the emotional field, and when the dormant codes in your DNA start to reawaken, the body responds by generating light, actual biophotons emitted by cells when they shift into a more ordered state. You may not see the light with your eyes, but you can feel its heat, the way it radiates through your chest, like an ember gaining strength. Imagine this inner sun as a sphere, resting softly in the center of your chest. At first it may feel small, like a glowing seed. With each steady breath it expands, not outward but inward, warming the inner walls of your being. This warmth is a signal. Your system is reorganizing itself around a higher level of clarity. Old emotional imprints loosen. The body stops bracing for the past. A new timeline begins forming within the cells before it ever appears in your outer life. The activation of the inner sun is rarely dramatic. It feels more like remembering something you didn't know you'd forgotten. You might find yourself reacting differently to situations that once triggered tension. You might notice an internal calm that stays present even when life becomes complex. You might feel a new steadiness in the way you breathe, move, and interpret the world around you. These are signs that your frequency is stabilizing, that the old loop is no longer dictating the shape of your days. When the inner sun expands, it operates like a gentle internal compass. It doesn't push you toward choices, it illuminates them, allowing you to see with a clarity that wasn't accessible before. You may sense a pull towards certain people or experiences, not out of longing or fear, but because something inside you recognizes resonance. The light helps you distinguish between what nourishes your field and what drains it. The more you listen to that warmth, the stronger it becomes. Let yourself breathe into that center now. Feel the expansion, not forced, not imagined, simply noticed. The warmth may spread outward through the sternum, into the shoulders, down the arms, or even up toward the throat. Each direction it travels marks a pathway clearing, a memory reorganizing, a piece of your system aligning with the new coherence forming within you. The inner sun is not something you create. It is something you uncover. It has always been waiting for the observer to awaken enough to feel it. Stay with the warmth for a moment longer. Let it expand as you breathe. This is the beginning of your new coherence. This is your body remembering that it is, and always has been, light folding itself into form. You stand now as the bridge between who you were and the timeline rising to meet you. The loop you carried has weakened, your field has lifted, and the ancient memory within you has begun to breathe again. The coherence you feel is not temporary. It's the signal of a new reality forming around you. You didn't discover this moment. You returned to it. Before you leave this moment, anchor what shifted inside you. Take one slow breath, feel the center of your chest, and let the new coherence settle into place. If this transmission resonated, subscribe so you can keep expanding with future activations. And write in the comments, I anchor the new coherence.